Hello, folks that have joined already. Welcome to our 7th episode of Hope, Heart, and the Human Spirit. We will begin shortly. We're waiting for a few more folks to come in. So if you're already on and you want to say hello, please say hello. Share with where you're from, where you're zooming in from. Not dialing in. I want to say dialing in. Zooming in from. We want to see where you're joining us from. All right, we'll get started shortly. So give us a few minutes.
Hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. I feel like I can say happy again, even though there's still a lot going on in the world. I want to go back to my greeting. Happy Wednesday. That doesn't discount all the other things that we need to talk about and think about, which we'll get into this afternoon. Thank you for being here. We'll wait just another minute or two before we get started. So check your cell phones, respond to a text message, check an email, get a glass of water, stop by the restroom if you need to. We'll be with you in just a moment. Really excited to have today's conversation. And actually, Danielle, I'm going to take you off mute for a second, if I can figure out how to do that again, because I'm really curious, because I know we used a dog as the background with this great rainbow. Are you a dog person? I meant to ask.
I am. I have a dog, a Maltipoo named Mackenzie, and you might hear him bark. I don't know.
I love it. We love appearances from dogs, and we love appearances from kids.
I just hope the kids don't walk in. I've told them, but short attention spans. We shall see.
Well, they need their mom.
I hope not during this. 1 hour. They can make it.
They're gonna be okay.
They're gonna be fine.
I love it. Okay. Well, I think we're gonna get started. Let's see here. I'm gonna make the screen so I'm not distracted by all of the different things that happen on my screen. We all have those pop-ups and the things that fly in and out, and they can distract us. And I want to be focused on the conversation. So hello, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Hope, Heart, and the Human Spirit. I am delighted to be joined by my friend and also an amazing leader and human, Danielle Schmelkin. You know what? I meant to double check. Do I say your name correctly, Danielle?
You do.
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad, because I coached Angela before and I was very confident. And then I said, I don't actually know. Well, I'm really delighted that you're here, Danielle.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And then, of course, for all of you who've been with us before, I see Karina Stevens wanted to say hi, Danielle. I don't know if you're seeing that.
Hi, Karina. No, I have the chat closed because like you, I don't want to be distracted by the 1,000 things, but I will pull it up. Hi, Karina.
I love it. And then, of course, for those of you who've been here before, but just in case you haven't, there's Angelo Cilia, who is here with us as well. Angelo is a longtime friend of mine and a communications expert. And so he'll be our producer behind the scenes, but also in front of the scene. It is what it is. And so he'll engage with you on the chat and help to make sure that your questions are answered, that Danielle and I don't miss them. And he'll also capture key quotes and things that we say that we can refer to, or that you can copy for yourself. So so glad that Angelo's here. And next week, actually, that you'll actually have a new face in Angelo's role. Another member of the Hummingbird Humanity team will be joining us. So I'm going to leave that as a little bit of a secret for now, and we'll surprise everyone next week. So I want to just, so those are the logistics. Ask questions in the chat. Danielle and I are going to just talk, and we're going to learn from her and about her. And if you have questions along the way, just let us know. So Danielle and I, for some of you may have read this in some of the posts, Danielle and I work together at Tapestry, which is, just in case you're not familiar, is the home of Coach Kate Spade and Stuart Weitzman, amazing brands. And really, it was really just a great place to work. And when I was leading diversity and inclusion there, I had the opportunity to ask some of the leaders to be part of leading our employee resource groups. And Danielle was one of the leaders who kindly enough said yes and helped to as the executive sponsor for our women's group. And that's we'd worked together when I was my HR business partner role, but that's, I think, when we really got to know each other, because we got to bring International Women's Day to life like in no way that Tapestry had seen before. And it was really great. So Danielle, I have so many things I want to say about you and who you are, but let me let you share a little bit about yourself and what you think is helpful for all of us to hear.
Sure. Love it. So that was a great intro. I'm so excited to be here. And when you asked me, I was like, oh God, what am I going to say to people that they'll find interesting? But I think, we're in such a unique moment. Maybe it's not unique, but we're in this moment where it feels like the world has turned upside down. And so when you asked me if I would join you on this, we were in a slightly different place than we are today. And so I've thought about what would be interesting now. And I think the way that you've framed this conversation being all about humanity is where I'd like to start. Because, we can talk about my career, we can talk about being a woman in technology, being a parent, being Jewish, being a member of the LGBTQ community. We can talk about so many things, but I think right now in this moment, really focusing on who we all are to each other is how I'm trying to focus, whether that's at work and being there for my team, making sure that we're creating the experiences for my team, for our larger community at work, for my family, and for the community that we are as part of this world. And so I know we're gonna have conversations about all of that, but I really think, especially in today's moment and why it's so important that the humanity aspect comes through, it's just the perfect grounding for the conversation.
Yeah, I love that. And I have to say, I was reflecting before I joined our conversation online before the call, and what hit me is you are the epitome of one of the things we talk about in inclusion and diversity, about the reality of intersectionality. You have, and we all have all of these diverse identities. You have a collection of them that fits in all of the different ways that we think about the work that we do and that we talk about a lot. And so I think it's fascinating. And you bring all of those different identities to you in the workplace, and collectively it makes you a human, just like each of us. And I think that's really beautiful. So since we're going to start with humanity, and I just, because it's the way my mind works now, I'm going to frame it in context of one of your identities. When we were talking the other day about what we might share today, you mentioned, and this phrase really stuck with me, that you want to raise good humans. Tell us about what that means today, and how that's maybe shifted from what it meant maybe 6 months ago, because the world has changed.
I actually think it's not a coincidence, maybe it is, being home now during this COVID crisis, and now the intersection of everything that's going on in Black Lives Matter. I am more grateful than ever to have this more focused time with my kids at home, because, without the commute and with the ability to pop out of this new makeshift office a few times a day and really have conversations with them and see what they're learning and make sure that I'm doing everything I can to impact their thinking and expose them to things that just don't naturally occur. And were we not in this COVID situation and I was in and out with work, literally in and out, I don't believe I would have the same focused attention. And I think it's, as eye-opening and horrible as many of the things that are happening right now, we have conversations literally, and I'm using that word right, literally every single night at dinner. We sit down, whether it's about Black Lives Matter, and it usually is the last several weeks, but on Monday, and after you and I spoke Monday morning, Brian, with, the Supreme Court ruling. And we had a 45-minute conversation about that ruling with the kids. And so for anyone who doesn't know, I have a 12-year-old daughter and 9-year-old twin boys. And obviously the conversation, we have to make sure that they understand it, that it's at a level that they can understand, but I'm trying to constantly push it slightly above their understanding and push their thinking and make sure that it is kind of like, we think about this now. This is not something that is happening to other people. Everyone is always other. Everyone is always other. And so what are you going to do about it? And I think what's interesting is my kids, they're kind of used to a little bit being other. We are Jewish. There's an otherness to that at times. They have 2 moms. There's an otherness to that. And so they're not numb to the fact that there's something that's just perceived as different about them. However, in this moment, really explaining to them the privilege that they have, that they didn't earn, and why it's important that they stand up and that they're vocal. And some of my proudest moments, candidly, are hearing them now interact on their morning meetings with their classmates when they're discussing it and hearing it in their voice. And so in this moment, being able to be so present for that and have those hard conversations, they become less hard if you have them every single day, because it's just part of our normal life now. But I think that has been something I'm really grateful for.
I love that. And we're going to come back to the Supreme Court because I can't believe we didn't start with that, but I want to keep going on this conversation for a moment.
Go ahead.
You mentioned a story that's from the Jewish faith that really encapsulates what you're talking about. Can you share that with us?
Oh my God, yeah. So it's funny when we were chatting about this, and we were kind of talking about the intersection of pride with Black Lives Matter, and the moment. And I even think about just a tangent for a second, like pride. We celebrate today with these parades. Well, not this year, but we celebrate. That all started with protest, and to see the parallels, and especially in June, it's the intersection there is profound to me. But the story I shared was there's this. I'll read the quote like as it is from a teaching from the Torah. It is, "You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it." And there are iterations that I'm sure, most of you have heard, but it comes from this story where there was this old man who's nearing the end of his life planting a carob tree, and someone comes by and they're like, "Why are you bothering? Like, it's going to take so many years for that carob tree to bear fruit." And the old man's response was, "People have planted those trees before me so I could enjoy the fruit of those carob trees. It is my responsibility to make sure that that's there for the next generation." And it's this, we want to leave a world, of course we want to live in it too, but we want to leave a world worth living in for future generations. And that it runs through the Jewish faith of you need to act, even if it's overwhelming. You can't do it alone. None of it is going to be on you, nor can you ignore it.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to reflect on our responsibility. And that's something that I have certainly been reflecting on over the last 3 weeks. As I think everyone here knows, I have for many years committed myself to doing this work and to celebrating others and to making the world a better place. So these conversations and that commitment is not new to me. I would also have always told you, and I will still tell you today, I have so much more to learn. There is no person who can understand fully the lived experiences of everyone else.
No.
I have learned significantly in the last 3 weeks about the experiences of the Black community, things I wish I had known previously, things I'm grateful that I know now, and I want to and will continue that work. and continue understanding and continue to be an advocate and a champion and ally. I'm curious what that looks like for you. You not only are you an ally and an advocate for inclusion, you're also a C-level leader. And so you have another level of responsibility, I'm sure, for the employees of your company and how you think about leaning into that role, and a parent, as you've already covered. So how are you thinking about this moment in time with Black Lives Matter, and what is it, how are you leaning in as an ally?
You know, I everything you say so resonates with me, and I think we think very similarly. And I would just add to that a little that, like, I actually feel there are times that I feel angry at myself for not having educated myself more in the past. And so, okay, no excuses, and I'm trying every day now. But I think one of the things is I do have the privilege to be able to make change. And so that's my obligation. That's change at all levels. That's change of making it okay to talk about. That's change of making everyone feel supported and giving them what they need. That's change around how we think about recruiting, how we think about using our voices in the campaigns that we put together, and how we show up. It's, you know, I feel so fortunate at Madewell, where I am today. The culture is really open. It's a free flowing conversation, and I'm grateful to be part of it. And even there, I feel the responsibility to speak for those who may not feel like they can. And so I recognize that I have that both privilege and responsibility. And, you know, I've really always believed this ever since I was a people manager, and this was a while back, that my biggest job is to be a good leader for my team, whatever that looks like in the moment. But I think this moment amplifies that even more. And I think you and I spoke on Monday, like, one of the things, if I can articulate this well, is this is not about making another sale. This is not about looking at our expenses and you know, making sure that we've got the right structure for the organization. This is about right versus wrong. And I try to lead from a place of right versus wrong. It's not that black and white. We know that. There's everything in between. But where in the past, I may have been in situations where I didn't feel like I could use my voice, or I was in a place where it could be heard. I'm not okay with that anymore. And it's more important for me to be able to do work on behalf of what's right than worry about, ooh, is this place a place I can speak up? If that makes sense.
It does. It really does. You know, something in there sparked for me, and it's largely probably driven by the fact that I admire you as a leader and a people manager, which is what you were talking about. When with the calls I'm getting from clients and colleagues today, what I'm hearing consistently is they don't know how to lean into conversations with their teams or employees right now who are struggling with how do they navigate this time, what, you know, whether they're feeling upset or they're feeling scared about how do they lean in and support. I'm sure you've had conversations, and I'm curious what, you know, if there are managers, people managers out there, leaders out there who are like, how do I lean into this? What advice or suggestions would you offer?
Yeah, I can only give it, obviously, from my perspective, and I'm sure it's not one size fits all, and it's not even one size fits everywhere I would be, right? But where I am right now, again, I'll go back to COVID being like it's kind of like a good thing right now, because the size of my team is fairly small. We have a meeting every single morning with the whole team so we can see each other's faces. And there's no formal agenda. You might call it a stand-up in the office, but a stand-up in the office really had a purpose of setting the foundation for the day. Us, it's really, how are you doing? And we've been doing this since mid-March when we've been working from home, right? But in the last few weeks, while we've maintained that, I personally, you know, I always have weekly touch bases with my direct reports. I also now have touch bases with every single member of the team. They're optional. You don't have to come. I've reached out to those who, when you see someone's face, without saying anything, you might get a sense of, is there something going on there? And you might be wrong. But my opening with any of those folks is like, how are you feeling today? Just that. And sometimes they want to share and sometimes they don't, and that's okay. There have been times though when, we've had a couple of virtual town halls in the last couple of weeks really addressing this as an overall company. And then, I've taken the chance to bring the team together after and try and make it a smaller conversation. And I think everyone is kind of asking that same question of, how do I do this in the right way? And I just don't think there is a right way, but I think I know I've tripped over myself. But I keep trying because it's right. It's right. And I believe, and look, there's many people in the leadership of Madewell that you can feel, even when someone's tripping up, you can feel the genuineness from someone who's not. And I hope, my goal is to always be genuine with my team. And when that's the place that we're coming from, I don't know, I feel like we've been able to connect.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this goes back to the first thing you talked about, which is it's really about humanity. Each person has their own things that are happening, their own feelings, their own challenges, their own fears, their own anger, whatever they're feeling right now.
And their own learning process, right. Their own way of internalizing and understanding where they fit in.
And how they're going to move forward. How do they lean into this? Absolutely. So I have to go back though.
Go back.
So I'm going to switch gears. There was a SCOTUS decision on Monday.
Was there?
I'll do more reflection probably later about why I didn't lead with that, because that's big news. What I think is probably the reason is, as much as Pride is typically celebratory, there, even within that, the work for the LGBTQ plus community, there's so much more work to do. This year, celebration doesn't feel like the right tone.
No.
And there are Black people who are being murdered just because they're Black, and that is not okay. And I don't feel like celebrating. Am I incredibly grateful for that decision? And do I hope it changes lives in significant, powerful ways? Yes. Do I also know that there's more work to do? Absolutely. But I'm curious, you and I happen to both be part of this community, the LGBTQ plus community. What did it mean to you?
To me, it meant more than the actual decision. It showed, and this is something I do truly believe, I do believe that most people are intrinsically good. I do believe that most people have good intention, right? But our history through many threads will show that is not what guides much of policy and much of what has been put in place to reinforce something that may not be so good. And I took this as a bigger statement than just the actual decision. I took this as a step forward for a lot of the good conversation that I hope is coming out of these crazy moments right now that are so necessary. And I know you didn't ask this, and we can go on tangents or we can't. Just the protests going on right now about Black Lives Matter, the protests and the riots, the peaceful and the violent. If you go back in history and look at significant change and how it's come about, it's usually not just by a couple of quiet people. And so I viewed this as maybe one domino. And so while it was very specific, and those of us in New York really, we've been a little bit more protected. And so it wasn't as monumental for New York, but now it's law of the land. And to me, when you even looked at the way, it wasn't just a 5-4 vote. 6-3 felt better, right? And so I wish it was unanimous. Nothing's ever, but that it felt like a domino.
Yeah.
And I hope it is.
I do too. I will say there was, and I'm glad you mentioned it, the 6-3, that felt significant for me. It did. And we know it's a conservative leaning
Yes.
court, and it was still 6-3.
Yeah.
That for me was that something that said we are making progress. Progress takes time, but we are making progress.
And even Brian, so I don't, you may realize this, I don't post on social that often. I'm more of a lurker. I like to see, but I don't even know what to share. But on Monday night, I did share on Instagram, probably the image that many people shared with the flag. And what also was interesting was who, obviously in my network, liked it in an empowering way. Folks that you're like, oh, I didn't even realize this would be top of mind for you. And maybe you're just liking it because you don't see my name come up that often. You just liked it. But I think it was, it's another nod to, we see you, we see that this is important, and it's just one thing, and there need to be more.
There definitely need to be more. Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to switch gears again.
Go ahead.
Because we can. And actually, I'll mention, if there's any questions out there, we'll lean into questions. You can drop it in chat. You can drop it in Q&A. We'll find it. We'll respond. Throw hard questions at us. Just no math problems. Before the call, we also learned that neither one of us know how to work printers, so don't ask us about printers.
No printers.
But in all seriousness, if there's something that you're curious about, please ask us. So, one of the things that I find, is I think it's an important conversation for us to have. We know that representation is a challenge across corporate America, and it's from a gender perspective, from an LGBTQ+ perspective, from a race and ethnicity perspective. Some companies do better than others, certainly, and there's certainly some companies that do such a great job that they really should celebrate. To be a woman who is at the C-level is significant. And you're also in technology, which is a space where we've made progress, I think, in having women's representation in technology. So I think that's wonderful. I can also I would presume, and we haven't actually talked about this, I just have this feeling that it wasn't an easy journey for you to get to where you are today. So I'd love for you to share, and my guess is there are probably some other women on the call who joined because they admire and they get to see a woman who's in a C-suite role, and that means something. I know what that feels like personally. So what would you share with them about your journey?
Oh gosh, it goes back a long time. It goes back to high school, and how much time do we have? But I don't even know if you know this, but I legitimately wanted to be an astronaut. Like legitimately.
Did you watch Space Camp as a kid?
Of course. I can quote it. We won't go there.
Obsessed with
I
that
quote it.
Okay.
Obsessed.
We'll talk about that some other time.
Okay, good. So I legitimately, and I went to Space Camp 3 times, by the way.
Amazing.
In high school. Yeah. So I was serious. I was going to be an astronaut, and I was not going to join the military, which was the most obvious way to get there. I was going to be a mechanical and aerospace engineer because that just sounded like what you were supposed to do, right? And I was always better at math and science. It just came more naturally to me. But in high school, the first thing is my parents said, we don't want you just to put all your eggs in a basket of a very technical school, like whether that's an MIT, because if you don't like it, you have to transfer. So maybe choose a school that has an excellent program, but if you don't like it, you could just transfer majors. Okay, so just put that away. But I remember when do you apply? In the beginning of senior year, you apply to college?
I think so.
So my guidance counselor started trying to talk me out of applying to these types of engineering schools in these competitive, more male-dominated fields. And here I was, like 16, 17 years old, super shy, didn't have a voice, and listening to him, right? And I go home and I tell my mom, and she was not having it. You know, here's a woman who, she was a graduate school professor for statistics, like accomplished, and she wasn't having it. She's like, you apply where you want to apply. It has nothing to do with him. And I did. And so I think, you know, that's the first bit of like, why are you trying to discourage me before you even know what I'm capable of? You know, and so that for a teenager, that's hard. That's hard to hear. Well, so I got into engineering and realized right away, like maybe within a month or two of my first semester, that I hated engineering. And cause like, you don't learn that in high school. And I'm like, but when you start learning, I'm like, oh, I'm not actually interested in the subject at all. Not to mention, yet again, it's 90% boys. Men, were they boys or men at the time?
Yes.
Boys.
Yes.
So luckily I had listened to my parents and I was able to switch my major and not my whole school. And there went my astronaut kind of thoughts. Cause I'm like, it's never what I'm going to stay in engineering on the tiny, tiny chance that this actually gets me to Mars. Anyway. So, then I found that, you know, I was a statistics major. The math it made sense. That's how I think. And then when it was time to graduate and, you know, everyone's applying for jobs, as a stats major, you could either be an actuary, which, you know, like you create models for an insurance company, or you went into consulting. And so I got a job at Andersen Consulting, only to find out that a classmate of mine in the same major who happened to be a man was offered more money than I was. Same job out of the same school. And I'm like, what is this? And so it just never, like, and again, I'm 22. I don't look the gift job in the mouth. I take the job. And I did well.
Can I
did well. Absolutely.
Because I want you to continue the story. You acknowledged the awareness.
Yeah.
I'm really curious how it felt to learn that a man was making more than you for the same job. It
was horrible. It was horrible. And he was a friend of mine and he was just sharing, like he shared his letter with me. And I'm like, what the, you know, he wasn't being mean-spirited about it. We were just sharing, right? And I actually called, was it a recruiter? I don't know. So whoever my contact was, and they tried to explain, here I'm 22, you know, they tried to explain, no, it really was different, but I knew what our grades were. I knew, and you know, this was a friend of mine. This was not, and it felt awful. It did, because I'm like, I don't want to pretend that I have felt every step of the way like it really was that different because I was a woman. But there were these few times when it's been like, oh my gosh, really? Is this what it's going to be like? So yeah, it felt awful. Yeah. And I couldn't do anything about it. And I took the job. Took the job. And it was the best first job I ever could have had. You know, the folks I worked for, they taught me what it meant to be a professional, about work ethic, about your work product and being part of a team. And so like the things that I learned in my 2 years there, I really credit that company with giving me the foundation that I built upon. And so, you know, I don't look back on it poorly, but it's a lesson to me that when I'm in the position to be making these decisions, I have to be conscious of that every day, because no one cared when it was me, you know? And so, and then, you know, for me, I did my work. I took pride in my work. I worked really hard. I have always been raised, and I believe to this day that while it's not enough, I think cream rises to the top. And I believe if you put in the work and you're good, you'll get rewarded for it. It's not as simple as that. I have learned throughout the rest of my career that you do have to be an advocate for yourself because no one else is going to do it for you. I have learned to be able to use my voice more. I have built my confidence over the years. I was always confident in my work product, but it took me a long time. And it's not something that I'm ever, like, I don't have 100% confidence today, you know, but it's something I work on and I practice because it matters. You have to do it. No one's going to do it for you. And speaking up, whether it's the small things around, well, what's your opinion of this solution we're trying to put in place? Or how do you think we should approach this cultural topic? You have to use your voice. And I feel like where in the past I may have felt like I couldn't, I don't know when a switch just flipped in me that I knew, maybe it was, you know what? It probably was at Tapestry, before it was Tapestry, when it was just Coach. And, you know, I would see other peers and colleagues getting recognized, and I wasn't being my own best cheerleader because it felt uncomfortable to me. But I think there's a balanced way of both being your own advocate without it being like you're just trying to get ahead, because they're different. They're different. There's a difference between being recognized for your accomplishments and making sure people are aware of them, and kind of the competitive cutthroat when you didn't earn it kind of. And I think finding my voice, I found it there. I definitely found it there.
Yeah. Well, and that takes a journey for each of us.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And one of the things that I hear in that story, and I know you've mentioned this already, that early in our conversation, that you're aware of this, is you've had these moments where you've learned that there is disparity in how, you know, and the gender pay gap is real, and hopefully we're closing it, but it's real.
Can I share a story?
Yeah, please do.
And I'll just be a little anonymous about it, so we're all friends here. I was having a conversation with someone about this once, not about my first job experience, but about more recent. And the answer that I got back was, well, I said, why aren't we analyzing this? We know this information. You can look into the system and see this information. This is not so hard. You sort this by M versus F and you know the answer. And the answer I got back was, if we see that we have it, then we're going to have to do something about it. So it was almost like, if we don't see that we have the problem, then we don't have to do anything about it. And that to me was, again, so disappointing, because it was an actual acknowledgement that there's a problem, but we're going to choose to put on our blinders. And I just think we have a greater responsibility.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that. Well, and that is the driver behind emerging legislation that requires reporting, which would hopefully help to equalize the playing field, which should be equalized. Yeah, and the other part of what I heard in your story is this: yes, you've had those moments of challenge, and yet you also have moments of privilege that has also allowed you to get to where you are, or to have those moments where you can advocate for yourself because you're allowed, because of what you look like or who you are, right? And not everyone, and I know that's true for me as well. I've had my moments of challenge, but there are, and it's not the pain Olympics, as Kenji Yoshino says. My pain and your pain can both be real and significant for us individually, but there is this awareness that we don't start as far behind as potentially others.
Have you seen the video? It's from a few years back. I think it's like in a high school, and it's on the field, and there's this coach, there's all these kids lined up in a line. He goes, we're going to race for $100 bill. But before we do, I'm going to ask you some questions. And if it's true for you, I want you to take 2 steps forward. And the questions are all like, did you ever have to worry about having a meal on your table for dinner. And all of the white people take a step forward. They never had to worry, right? And so after 10 or so of these questions, you see it's mostly the white kids in this school who have a huge head start before this race starts, right? And the lesson, and he's like, I'm telling you, the folks in the back, they're equally as talented as you. There's nothing that you stepped forward for that you earned. You did nothing to step forward. But this $100 is going to be yours because of your head start. And so it's your obligation to make sure that you stop that. And it was such a good video. I showed it to my kids and that they were like, oh, I get that. I get that. And I feel that way too. You just, when we spoke about this on Monday, I was so happy when you're like, okay, you're using your voice, but you realize you have a privilege to use it. And you're right. And I've turned it into, and therefore it's my obligation to use it for others. For me, it's one thing. And, I'm thrilled that I've gotten to where I am, but like my most important job right now is to do it for others. It's my most important job at work and at home.
Yeah, absolutely. We will have to find that video and get it posted.
It's so good. I will send you a link.
Amazing.
Oh, you mean right now?
No, well,
I can't multitask that, Brian.
Danielle says, I'm talented, but I'm only so talented.
Not that talented.
Well, for those of you watching, we'll get the video and we'll get it posted on the Hummingbird Humanity Facebook and
there you go.
pages. So keep an eye out for it. Well, and something else that you reminded me of, and actually one thing I realized this is a complete sidebar that we didn't ask everyone to do or encourage everyone to do is feel free to share your information, who you are, where you're from. We usually do it at the beginning, so I know it's 3:43. It's an odd time, but hey, this is when I remembered. So I'm just gonna mention it. Feel free to introduce yourselves and connect with each other. This is part of what we get to do in this forum. Something you reminded me of in what you were just sharing is that you and I and others that have similar characteristics and others that don't have privilege, and we have a responsibility for that privilege. And I was having a conversation this morning with a colleague about, and it's largely women in my life, women that leaders that I've had the opportunity to work for, who have opened doors for me, who have given me opportunity, who have seen potential in me and said, I think you need to be here, who have mentored me, who have made time for me. And I believe that I've always been the leader and manager who's done that for others. I'm becoming more and more aware of the importance of doing that because I have the ability to open doors for others. Mm-hmm. And I've had people open doors for me. And I know, and I'm sure you have a whole collection of people. The first person that comes to mind for me, and I know it's a leader that we both got a chance to work with at Tapestry, Mike Brain, who I know has been, a mentor to you and helped you in your journey as a CIO. And he's a great example of a straight white cis man who is committed to people because they're people, but he does that.
I reached out to him a few weeks back, and I was just basically telling him, like, I just wanted to give him some feedback in a way that he probably doesn't understand how much he influenced his team. Because you learn something from all of your, managers and leaders. And I've taken so much from how he thinks and how he frames up topics that I can't imagine doing that in my role now without that wisdom. And so I reached out to him just to say, like, oh my God, when you said this, I say that all the time now. I say it all the time. And the way that I think about what I can do for my team or the folks coming up in the organization, whether it's on my team or, the partners that we work with, is painting a vision, imagining those possibilities and creating that thread for your team and showing them, being that teacher leader. And it's something, Mike did this very well. It's also something I follow, this blogger. He's like this analytics guru from Google. I'm going to get his name wrong, but it's Avinash. I think it's pronounced Kaushik. And he has this weekly newsletter that I subscribe to. A lot of times it's like a really technical topic about analytics, which I eat up. But the one that he had last week was all about being this teacher leader. And he started with this scenario where he was describing how he and his wife are being teacher leaders to their children in this work from home, learn from home scenario. And then he weaved it into being a teacher leader in your work life. And he really focused on two things. And I'm like, I do that, but I wasn't conscious of it. And he's like, you gotta always be making sure a good leader will continue to nurture the technical side of their role, technical being whatever your domain is. So for me, it would be, continuing to stay current on innovations and technology, as well as the human or organizational side of your leadership. And that's all around growing and mentoring your team and the organizational, political structure and business acumen, because there are great leaders who can just inspire, and there are great technical contributors who can do excellent domain work. But if you're not the combination of the two is where this teacher leader comes in that is growing that next generation. And it really resonated with me. And I find that that's how I like to be. And so maybe that's why it resonated with me. But yeah, it's when you like something, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy sometimes. But the examples he gave, and I think we have a link for him too. We may have a link for him too. The examples that he gave around challenging your team, but don't do the problem for them, but working through the frameworks with them and painting that vision, giving them the framework in which they can succeed, really was powerful for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would agree. Mike does that. And that's why what does he win last year? Chief Information Officer of the Year?
For, yes, the Orby Awards.
Orby Awards.
Yes.
So, well, and this is, the conversation is about Mike, but I think he's a leader who had an impact on both of us because he's one of those people who make space for others.
Yeah.
That's powerful. I want to, don't forget to ask those questions in chat, everyone. Feel free. I want to go back to something we started at, and if there aren't any questions, then I'll go to a couple of my favorite sort of just who's Danielle as a human questions. But before we get to that, those questions, I know you and I are both fans of Reshma Saujani.
Oh yes.
And the Girls Who Code organization. One thing that it just hit me as I percolate on everything we're talking about. We talked about early on allyship, and you mentioned that you're sometimes going to get it right and sometimes going to get it wrong. My words, not yours, but the spirit of it. And tomorrow I'm going to be on another call, which it's the Jennifer Brown Consulting Diversity and Inclusion weekly call with Mita Malik, who's from Unilever. And we are going to be talking about imperfect allyship. And I just realized there's a connection here between Brave, Not Perfect and this conversation tomorrow. So I know that book and Reshma's message has been significant for you. I'd love to hear from you what it means to you.
I love it. And she is inspiring, and she is a powerhouse. If you haven't had the chance to hear her speak, I think she even has a TED Talk, which is like bite-sized, and you can get the sense of her. But the premise of Brave, Not Perfect is that, and I'm not going to get it exactly right, but boys are raised to be brave and girls are raised to be perfect. And it's kind of a mindset. And the example she uses that really resonated with me, that I then had to challenge myself to think, am I like that? She'll say, if there's an open role in your company, or you're applying for a job somewhere and you're looking at a job description, a woman will look at that job description. I'm generalizing. She's generalizing. But a woman will look at that job description and think she has to check off every single box on the required qualifications or well, I guess I can't apply to that because I don't have all 50 things. Whereas a man will look to check off about 50%. And then he'll apply and like, yeah, I can do that. And it's the brave, not perfect, where women are looking to, well, it says 50 things. So why would they ask for that if they didn't really mean it? And it so resonated with me because it actually reminds me of a different thread that I've pulled in my whole career. An early leader, when I worked at PepsiCo, my boss's boss, he left the company shortly after I joined, like a year after, to become the head of IT at Pepperidge Farm. And he calls me and he says, come to Pepperidge Farm. I want you to build a data warehouse. And I said, what's a data warehouse? And he said, I don't know, but they say they need one and we're just going to figure it out. And I'm like, okay. And so he saw something in me and knew we were going to figure it out, and we figured it out. But isn't that so what she was saying? If you kind of have the sense, like, we're going to figure this out, it doesn't have to be perfect. We're going to be able to figure it out. And I've tried to lead that way as well. I don't look for people who have the experience exactly that we're looking to implement. I look for people who are quick learners, who have some relevant experience, who have a drive, who are willing to change on a dime, because everything changes on a dime. And we're going to figure it out. And like, my career has been a series of just figuring it out. But when Reshma said that, I'm like, why is that so profound to me? Of course, when I've looked at job descriptions, I'm like, oh, I don't have that. And it goes against this whole figure it out mindset. And so I'm trying to be more conscious of it.
I will completely own that I have many a time applied for a job where I only have about 50% of the qualification.
There you go.
I say, I believe that I can.
I'm going to try it.
I'm going to give it.
I'm going to try it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it will, and as I've been, I have a commitment in this work to try to understand the lived experiences of others. And I think that's important for me to do the job that I do. And one of the things I've been really paying attention to recently is this concept we're talking about right now, which is, I actually, and I'll put it in the language that's sort of been coming to my mind, is I've always been able to believe it's going to work out okay. But I kind of think that's also the experience of a white guy.
Yeah.
It sort of works out.
Because it never hasn't, right?
Right. I mean,
it never hasn't.
I've had significant hurdles and significant bumps, and
you got up again.
I've fallen but I've gotten up again, and it's worked out.
Yeah.
And I've never, and going to the tragedies of that are part of our conversation today, I don't ever leave my house worrying that I'm going to get killed when I walk outside my door.
That's right.
It's like, I know it's going to be okay, because that's the world I get to live in. So we could go back to that conversation. We've covered that, and we've covered it for today. There's always more to talk about. I want to leave on a light note, because these are tough times. They're important times. We're having real conversations. I'm really hopeful. I'm sad for the lives that have been lost in the Black community. It's tragic. I'm hopeful, though, that those lives, at this point in time, we're going to see that they're not, that the loss isn't in vain, and that it's going to be a wake-up call, and we're going to do better. So that's my hope. So leading into that, I'm gonna merge two questions here, or maybe I'll speak them both. I'm curious, as you think about your world as just an individual, as a person, as a parent, as a leader, what brings you joy and what gives you hope? And maybe they're different or the same. Yeah. I'm curious.
There's commonality in both, but personally, what brings me joy, lately, just honestly, a sunny day and a breath, a chance to take a breath outside of fresh air. That just brings me some joy lately, because you have to step out and do a little self-care. Hearing my kids laugh, I said this before, hearing them learning and how they're expressing it, that gives me joy and hope. It gives me hope because seeing that these long held prejudices are maybe being chipped away at, and we're having a larger dialogue. The dialogue gives me hope. Being with my really mighty team gives me hope. The energy and the goodness and the talent and the different thinking and the real proven scenarios that we are better together. I know that was a Tapestry thing, but we are. That any one idea that any one of us may have, and then we talk about it and we just made it better. And the thing that we end up doing is way better than the thing that we started with. And that gives me hope and gives me joy. And I think if we all could do that a little bit more, just a little bit more, it can go back to what we started talking about in the beginning with that, that teaching from the Torah, which is, it is overwhelming, but you don't have to complete it, but you can't let it go either. You have to be part of it. And that gives me hope.
Love that. I love that. And even though it was a Tapestry tagline, I still use it all the time because there's something powerful.
It just works.
We are better together.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that one of the outcomes of the conversations we're having today allows us to be together even more and understanding the history that got us to where we are today, helping to build those bridges and extending hands of support and protection and care, and love and opening doors for others. That is all in the spirit of we're better together. Okay, so we're going to do some final comments here, and Danielle, in just a second, I'll just ask if you have any parting words. I want to do give a plug for next week. Next Wednesday, I'll be joined by Jeffrey Smith, really phenomenal leader. He and I had a chance to work together on a client project, diversity, equity, inclusion professional, HR professional, and one of the kindest, calmest person. Every time I tell him, I said, I want to embrace the calmness that you embody, Jeffrey. So Jeffrey will be with me next week. So please join us. If you have comments or suggestions or feedback, we have a feedback form at hummingbirdhumanity.com live. You'll see that at the bottom right of your screen. Love your ideas and thoughts. So join us next week. Also next Tuesday, if you are so inclined, we're hosting a special Pride at the intersection of Black Lives Matter event with Peppermint and Sean Coleman and Ronna Reeves. And we're going to talk primarily about Black trans lives and the tragic deaths of 3 Black trans individuals in the last couple of weeks. So please join us on Tuesday. Danielle,
Brian.
And again, please share your information in the chat. Connect with each other. We're all part of a community, and as we were just talking about, we're better together. So please definitely connect with each other and share your information. I'm going to say it again, Danielle. Any parting words for the group?
No, I would just again reiterate how great it was to be able to chat with you, and I'm honored to even be having this conversation. I think my parting words, I'll just repeat kind of what I said before, which is trying to take every day and really lead from a place of right versus wrong. And when that guides you, I feel like it gets you to the right place. And it may not be a straight line, because it usually isn't. But now more than ever, that purpose, I'm not willing to settle to be somewhere where you're on the wrong side of that balance.
Absolutely. And in the spirit of the title of Reshma's book, sometimes being on the side of right is, you have to truly be brave.
Yeah.
And I believe that for individuals like you and me who do have privilege, that this is that time where we have to stand up and we have to take risks. And sometimes those risks can be scary and might not have the outcome for ourselves that we are hoping for. But we've been really fortunate, and it's time for us to protect and advocate for others.
Well said.
I love that. Danielle, thank you for being here. I'm so glad we got to share this conversation together. I've missed working with you, but this was another way for us to bring working together to life. So thank you for spending time with us. Everyone who joined us this afternoon or is watching on the replay, thank you for being with us. We hope that you have found value in our conversation today, and hopefully you'll tune in next time. Thanks, everyone. Be well.